Richard accepted the handle of the sledgehammer. He could have looked no more noble doing so if he had been taking a jewel-encrusted sword. Richard's raptor gaze left Brother Narev and swept out over the crowd as he took several strides toward the steps. Brother Narev lifted a finger, signaling the guards to hold their spears. By the smirk on the faces of Brother Narev and Neil, they didn't think the crowd would care to hear anything a sinner had to say. "You are ruled," Richard said in a voice that rang out over the multitude, "by mean little men." The people gasped as one. To speak against a brother was treason, most likely, and heresy for sure. "My crime?" Richard asked aloud. "I have given you something beautiful to see, daring to hold the conviction that you have a right to see it if you wish. Worse, I have said that your lives are your own to live." A rolling murmur swept out through the multitude. Richard's voice rose in power, demanding in its clarity to be heard above the whispering. "Evil is not one large entity, but a collection of countless small depravities brought up from the muck by petty men. Living under the Order, you have traded the enrichment of vision for a gray fog of mediocrity, the fertile inspiration of striving and growth for mindless stagnation and slow decay, the brave new ground of the attempt for the timid quagmire of apathy." With gazes riveted and lips still, the crowd listened. Richard gestured out over their heads with his sledgehammer, wielded with the effortless grace of a royal sword. "You have traded freedom, not even for a bowl of soup, but worse, for the spoken empty feelings of others who say that you deserve to have a full bowl of soup provided by someone else. Happiness, joy, accomplishment, achievement are not finite commodities to be divided up. Is a child's laughter to be divided up and allotted? No! Simply make more laughter." Laughter, pleased laughter, rippled through the crowd. Brother Narev's scowl grew. "We've heard enough of your extremist rambling. Destroy your profane statue, now." Richard cocked his head. "Oh? The collective assembly of the Order and of brothers fears to hear what one insignificant man could say? You fear mere words that much, Brother Narev?" Dark eyes stole a quick glance at the crowd as they leaned forward, eager to hear his answer. "We fear no words. Virtue is on our side and will prevail. Speak your blasphemy so all may understand why moral people will side against you." Richard smiled out at the people, but he spoke with brutal honesty. "Every person's life is theirs by right. An individual's life can and must belong only to himself, not to any society or community, or he is then but a slave. No one can deny another person their right to their life, nor seize by force what is produced by someone else, because that is stealing their means to sustain their life. It is treason against mankind to hold a knife to a man's throat and dictate how he must live his life. No society can be more important than the individuals who compose it, or else you ascribe supreme importance not to man, but to any notion that strikes the fancy of that society, at a never-ending cost of lives. Reason and reality are the only means to just laws. Mindless wishes, if given sovereignty, become deadly masters. Surrendering reason to faith in these men sanctions their use of force to enslave you, to murder you. You have the power to decide how you will live your life. These mean little men up here are but cockroaches, if you say they are. They have no power to control you but that which you grant them." Richard pointed with the sledgehammer back of the statue. "This is life. Your life, to live as you choose." He swept the head of the sledgehammer in an arc, pointing out the carvings up on the walls. "This is what the Order offers you. Death." "We've heard enough of your blasphemy," Brother Narev shrieked. "Destroy your evil creation now or die." The spears rose. Richard calmly swept a fearless glance around at the guards, then stepped to his statue. Nietzsche's heart was pounding against her ribs. She didn't want it destroyed. It was too good to destroy. This couldn't be happening. They couldn't take this away. Richard rested the sledgehammer across his shoulder. He lifted his other hand up to the statue as he addressed the crowd one last time. "This is what the Order is taking from you. Your humanity, your individuality, your freedom to live your own life." Richard briefly touched the sledgehammer to his forehead. With a mighty swing, the steel head arced around. Nietzsche could hear the air whistle. The entire statue seemed to shudder as the sledgehammer struck the base with a thunderous boom. In a moment of brittle silence, she heard the faintest sound, the ripping, popping, crackling whisper of the stone itself. Then the entire statue crashed down in a roar of fragments and billowing white dust. The officials at the back of the plaza cheered. The guards hooted and hollered as they waved their weapons in the air. They were the only ones. The crowd was dead silent as dust rolled out across the plaza. All their hope embodied in the statue had just been destroyed. Nietzsche stared in a daze, her throat constricted with the agony of it. Her eyes watered. They all watched, as if having just witnessed a tragic, pointless death. The guards moved toward Richard with their spears leveled, prodding him back to other guards waiting with heavy shackles. Down closer to the steps, a clear voice rang out from the stunned crowd. "No! We'll not stand for it!" In the gathering darkness, Nietzsche saw the man who had yelled. He was up close to the front, furiously trying to fight his way through the press of people to get to the plaza. It was the blacksmith, Mr. Casella. "We'll not stand for it," he roared. "I'll not let you enslave me any longer, do you hear? I'm a free man! A free man!" The entire mass of people before the palace erupted in a deafening roar, and then, as one, they lunged forward. Fists in the air, voices raised in cries of rage, the mass of humanity avalanched toward the plaza. Ranks of heavily armed men marched down the steps to meet the advance. They vanished beneath the onslaught. Nietzsche screamed with all her might, trying to get Richard's attention, but her voice was lost in the hurricane. Richard didn't know what stunned him more, to see his statue in rubble, or to see the crowd charging up the steps after Victor had declared himself a free man. The mob rolled without pause over armed guards descending the steps to meet them. A number of people fell wounded or killed. The bodies were trampled beneath the surge of people. Those in front couldn't stop if they wanted to. The weight of tens of thousands behind them propelled them onward, but they didn't want to stop. The roar was deafening. The brothers panicked. The officials in the rear panicked. The few thousand armed guards panicked. In that instant, the nature of the world transformed from the omnipotent power of the Order assembled on the plaza to every man for himself. Richard wanted Brother Nariv. He saw instead armed men rushing in at him. Richard swung and buried the head of the sledgehammer in the chest of a man who came at him with sword raised high. As the man flew past, the handle of the sledgehammer sticking from the crater in his chest, Richard snatched the sword from his fist, and then, blade in hand, he unleashed himself. A small group of guards saw fit to protect the brothers. Richard charged into them, cutting with every stroke. Every slash or thrust took a man down. But guards were not what Richard was mainly interested in. If he was to lose everything, he wanted Nariv's head in the bargain. As he fought his way through the chaos of people crushing into the plaza, he couldn't find Brother Nariv anywhere. Victor appeared out of the melee, gripping a brother by the hair. Other men had joined Victor, and each had a hand on the brother. The burly blacksmith wore a scowl that would bend iron. The brother's eyes were rolling around as if he'd been hit on the head and couldn't gather his senses. "Richard!" Victor called out. The men, some still grasping the brother's brown robes, rushed in around Richard. They stood in a sweep around him, 10 or 15 deep. "What should we do with him?" one man asked. Richard glanced around at all the people. He saw men he knew from the sight. Priska was among them, and Ishak, too. "Why ask me? It's your revolt." He met the eyes of the men with challenge. "What do you think you should do with him?" "You tell us, Richard," one of the carvers said. Richard shook his head. "No! You tell me what you intend to do with him. But you should know this man is a wizard. When he comes around, He's going to start killing people. This is a matter of life and death, and he knows it. Do you? This is about your lives. It is for you to decide what to do, not me." "We want you with us this time, Richard," Priska called out. "But if you still won't join us, then we're having our lives back, having this revolt without you. That's the way it's going to be." The men all shook their fists as they yelled their agreement. Victor hugged the groggy brother to his chest and wrenched his head until his neck broke. The limp body slipped to the floor. "And that's what we intend to do with him," Victor said. Richard held out his hand as he smiled. "Always glad to meet a free man." They clasped forearms. Richard looked into Victor's eyes. "I'm Richard Rahl.